The design element of value is an essential part of creating a certain look and feel in a design. Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. Well, in this video, we're going to be talking about the interior design element of value and talk about the characteristics of this design element and how we can use it in our home to create a certain look and feel. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what the design elements are. And the design elements are almost like tools or ingredients in a recipe that we use to create a certain look and feel. And there are a number of design elements that we use as tools to help us create a certain look and feel to the interior design of our home. And those include color and texture and line. And value is the tool that we use when we want to figure out the lightness and darkness of everything in our home. And there's a scale or a range of different types of values in how light or how dark something is. It can be very light, and then also it can go all the way to the other side where it's very dark, and anything else in between. And everything in our home has value to it, has a certain lightness or darkness, or maybe a combination and different variations of different values on it. And one type of design element that we think of the most when we talk about light or dark is color, because color comes in a range of lighter colors and darker colors. And it's something that we think about when we choose colors. And when we put a filter on this photograph of a room, we are going to take away the design element of color. And that way we can just notice value. And we can just notice the lighter values, the darker values, and everything in between. And value is an important component when you are making a decision about materials. You'll want to think about how light you want your bedding to be, or how dark you want your sofa to be. Or in a larger project, maybe you're redoing your bathroom or redoing your kitchen. You'll want to think about how light or dark that you want your cabinets to be, and your countertop, your flooring, your walls, everything that goes into that room. You'll want to think about the lightness and darkness of all of those different materials and how all of those will work together to create a balanced look. And there are some neat things about value that help us, along with color and texture and line and all of those other design elements, to help create a certain look and feel in our home. And one of those is how it helps to create contrast. And there are different types of contrast. When we use very light colors next to very dark colors, that's going to create a very bold and energetic statement. So that could be in this example where we have really dark cabinets, but then the contrast with very light countertops and walls, and even the stainless steel appliances. And just by using very different values together, very light and very dark values together, that darker color will look much darker just because it's next to a very light color. And that light color will look much brighter and lighter just because it is next to a very dark color. And then the opposite of that would be if you have less contrast, where the range of values are closer together. There isn't this big jump from very light to very dark. And that creates a much different look. It creates a softer look and a much calmer look. And this kitchen is a good example of that, where there are white cabinets and light wood floors and even a soft, subtle pattern on the granite countertops. There are stainless steel appliances and silver light fixtures. And even the chairs have a little bit of a darker value to them, but everything is kind of within this certain range. There aren't these big jumps between light and dark. there's just this closer range of values that this kitchen is working with. So there isn't a big jump from one value to another. And these large contrasts or more subtle contrasts can be applied to any type of material or any type of furnishing that we have in our home. Another thing that value helps us do is to create emphasis. So that could mean creating a focal area in a room where our eyes are drawn to that area. And a good example of that would be an accent wall. And when we use a contrasting value on an accent wall compared to the rest of the wall color in a room, that's going to help draw our attention because we're using a darker color on that accent wall compared to a lighter color in the rest of the room. Or in this example, where we have a fireplace and that gray, darker stone is grabbing our attention. That's a focal area. The fireplace is a natural focal area in a living room. And just because we're using a darker value, the stone is darker than the walls, then that creates more emphasis and really grabbing our attention even more. And another example of this would be maybe a sofa where you have a very dark sofa, and just by using a darker color on the sofa, especially if it's surrounded by lighter colors, that helps to grab our attention and maybe help create a focal area in that room. And we can use value to help create the illusion that something is larger or smaller. So in general, when we use lighter colors in a room, say on our walls and on our flooring, that helps to create the illusion that room may be more expansive or larger than it is. And then the opposite of that is if we have a room that is dark, well, that's going to create a more intimate and cozy look and feel. And maybe you have a sofa in your living room and you choose a darker color. Well, that darker color will give the illusion that that sofa is maybe bigger or heavier than maybe it is compared to a sofa that's in a lighter color. And with the assistance of lighting, value can also help to have us notice the three-dimensionality of things in our room, as well as break up maybe flat areas. So one example of that is that we will notice the form, say the three-dimensional shape of a sofa or a chair, and we'll notice that there are different values on that piece of furniture that naturally help to create the sense that something has some depth to it, which helps our eyes to notice that this is actually a three-dimensional object. And even on things that we consider to be flat, we can think of bedding, and just because of shadows and the way the light falls on the bedding, we'll notice that that bedding is not completely flat. Or maybe a solid color of drapery that we have on our walls. And because there are folds on those draperies, those areas that receive the least amount of light will have some shadows in there, and those areas with more light will have lighter areas in there. And all of those different values help us to look at the drapery and remember that it's actually very three-dimensional. It can also draw our eyes to brick on a wall or tile on a wall, where maybe the outlines, the grooves around the brick or around a tile will be darker, and that helps to outline the areas that will have more light to show us the three-dimensionality of those types of materials. So it's kind of fun to notice the different values just on a brick wall where you have some shadows and lighter areas, and it reminds us that that brick wall isn't flat. And even on a flat surface like a painted wall, because of lighting coming into the room and how that will change throughout the day, it breaks things up on the wall so that wall doesn't look as flat, where we have some darker values and lighter values and everything in between. And it helps to bring more beauty to even a wall. And another thing that value does, it helps us to see forms like the outlines or the edges of things. When there are shadows cast onto the ground, or when a lighter value is set up against a darker value, we can see the outlines and edges of things. And that's a good thing because we want to make sure we move around a room really easily. And so having shadows and different values is helpful because we wouldn't want everything to be all light or all dark. We want to have some variations so we can see the outlines of forms and the edges of things. Another thing that value helps us do is to create variety in a room. So ideally, it's nice when our rooms have a balance of different values happening in them. And that can mean some darker values, lighter values, and everything in between. And of course, depending upon the lighting, that will change throughout the day. But all of that together helps to create a more interesting look and feel to a room. And value is a really important component when we want to create a certain mood in a room. So maybe using darker colors will help us to create a cozier look, or maybe a more bold look. Or if we want a room to look cheerful and very happy, we may want to use lighter values to help us achieve that. And there are a couple things that you can think about when you want to think about value and which values to use. One thing just to start with is to make sure you know how you want a room to look and feel, because that will tell you which values will work better for you. So in general, if you want to create a very bold statement, you may want to use very contrasting values, very light values with very dark values. And that's a very different feel compared to one where you want things to be a little softer and cozier, where you would want to use maybe softer contrast. So different values that are closer together on that value scale. So there isn't this big jump between very light and very dark. And if you want your home or room to look larger or smaller, use value to help you do that. So in general, use darker colors to create a cozier look and lighter colors to help give us the illusion that a room is larger. And use value to help you create a focal area. So if a lot of the colors in a room are very light, well, you can create a focal area by using a darker value. Or the opposite can happen. If you have a darker room, using something that's lighter is going to stand out. And that's a good way to think about creating a focal area. And one thing to keep in mind is make sure to think about bringing in a variety of values into a room. And lighting will help you do that naturally throughout the day, and at night you are going to have different values happening in a room because of shadows and where the light is. But one thing to do also is to be intentional about bringing in a balancing value to help kind of balance the look and feel that you have going on in a room. And you can just do this in small ways. So if you have kitchen cabinets that are very dark, well, what about bringing in a lighter value finish for the cabinet handles or cabinet hardware, or even on the plumbing fixtures, just so that there is some variety happening in that space. And one thing that might be fun for you to do, just to kind of practice noticing value around you, is that you can take a picture of one of your rooms. And if you can, maybe in the morning, midday, and at night. And then put a filter on those photos so that all you're noticing is just value. You're not noticing color. And just take notice of what values you have happening in that room. Some darker values, lighter values, and everything in between. And also notice how that will change throughout the day, depending upon the lighting that's happening in the room. And so just have some fun doing that, because that helps us to kind of notice value and also helps us think about, oh, maybe we can bring in some different values into a room if a room looks and feels maybe a little unbalanced. And I'd love to hear from you if you have any other ideas about thinking about using value in our home, and if you have any questions about this topic. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.